May our Father, Messiah, and the Holy Spirit be with us. Whereas a wise man has his eyes in his head, whereas a fool walks in darkness. But I also realized that the same fate awaits them both. So I reflected the fate of the fool is also destined for me. To what advantage then have I been wise? And I came to the conclusion that that too was futile. Because the wise man, just like the fool, is not remembered forever. For as the succeeding days roll by, both are forgotten. At last the wise man dies just like the fool. You can't throw that, okay, baby? Can't throw it. And so I loathed life, for I was distressed by all that goes on under the sun. Because everything is futile in pursuit of wind. So too I loathed all the wealth that I was gaining under the sun, for I shall leave it to the man who will succeed me, and who knows whether he will be wise or foolish, and he will control all the wealth that I gain by toil and wisdom under the sun. Let me know if he's throwing that in there. I said, let me know if he's throwing that ball in there. And wisdom under the sun, that too is futile. And so I gained to you with despair all the gains I had made under the sun. For sometimes a person whose fortune was made with wisdom, knowledge, and skill must hand it on to be the portion of somebody who did not toil for it. That too is futile and a grave evil. For what does a man get for all the toiling and worrying he does under the sun? All his days, his thoughts are grief and heartache, and even at night his mind has no respite. That too is futile. I wrote here, just sadly, my dad, I pray for Chad Fitzgerald Morton, amen, to come out of Babylon, amen. And I pray that you may pray for him as well. His name is Chad Fitzgerald Morton, and I love my dad. There's nothing worthwhile for a man but to eat and drink and afford himself enjoyment with his means, and even that I know that comes from Elohim. It all comes from Elohim. For who eats and who enjoys but myself? To the man, namely, who pleases him, he has given the wisdom and shrewdness to enjoy himself. Amen. And to him who displeases, he has given the urge to gather and amass only for handing on to one who is pleasing to Elohim. That too is futile in pursuit of wind. Amen. A season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for being born and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for uprooting the planet, a time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones, a time for embracing and a time for shunning embraces, a time for seeking. A time for seeking and a time for losing, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for ripening and a time for sowing, a time for silence and a time for speaking, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for war and a time for peace. Amen. A time for peace is coming very, very soon. What value then can the man of affairs, which you can definitely walk around in peace every single day, all the way up till we make it to the kingdom of heaven. Amen. What value then can the man of affairs get from what he earns? I have observed the business that Elohim gave man to be concerned with. He brings everything to pass precisely at its time. He also puts entire eternity in their mind. But without man ever guessing from first to last all the things that Elohim brings to pass, thus I realize that the only worthwhile thing there is for them is to enjoy themselves and do what is good in their lifetime. Also, that whenever a man does eat and drink and get enjoyment out of all his wealth, it is a gift of Elohim. I realize too that whatever Elohim has brought to pass will recur evermore. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it. And Elohim has brought to pass that men revere him. What is occurring occurred long since, and what is to occur occurred long since. And Elohim seeks the pursued, and indeed I have observed under the sun. Alongside justice there is wickedness, alongside righteousness there is wickedness. I mused, Elohim would doom both righteous and wicked, for there is a time for every experience and for every happening. So I decided as regards men to dissociate them from the divine beings and to face the fact that they are beasts. For in respect of the fate of man and the fate of beast, they have one and the same fate. As the one dies, so dies the other, and both have the same life breath. Man has no superiority over beast. Amen. Since both amount to nothing. Amen. Both go to the same place. Both came from dust and both return to dust. What's he doing? Chill out, bro. Come here. Who knows if a man's life breath does rise upward, and if a beast's breath, come here, legend, and if a beast's breath does sink down into the earth. Come here. Just for a little bit. Come here. I love you.
He's all right now.
Alright, because he's funny, bro. Does rise upward, and if a beast's breath does, who knows if a man's life breath does rise upward, and if a beast's breath does sink down into the earth. I saw that there is nothing better for man than to enjoy his possessions, since that is his portion, for who can enable him to see what will happen afterward? I further observed all the oppression that goes on under the sun, the tears of the oppressed, with none to comfort them, and the power of the oppressors, with none to comfort them. Then I accounted those who died long since more fortunate than those who are still living. And happier than either are those who have not yet come into being and have never witnessed the miseries that go on under the sun. I have also noted that all labor and skillful enterprise come from men's envy of each other, another futility in pursuit of wind. Constant competition is a pursuit of wind. I just wrote that note there. I mean, that's facts. True, the fool folds his hands together and has to eat his own flesh, but no less truly, better is a handful of gratification than two fistfuls of labor, which is pursuit of wind. And I have noted this further futility under the sun, the case of the man who was alone, with no companion, who was neither son nor brother. It's a blessing how a son doesn't make up for a lost brother. Yet he amasses wealth without limit, and his eye is never sated with riches. For whom now is he amassing it while denying himself enjoyment? I feel like a brother can make up for a lost son as well. I mean, yet he amasses wealth without limit, and his eye is never sated with riches. For whom now is he amassing it while denying himself enjoyment? That too is a futility and an unhappy business. Two are better off than one, in that they have greater benefit from their earnings. Ledge, come here. What's wrong? What's wrong? What are you trying to do? What you trying to do? What you trying to do? Let me see. What you trying to do with it? Yay. Yay. I think it's time. Yep. May our Father in the Son Spirit with us. Play with my son. We're going to pick back up on this, Father willing. Well, later on today in the morning time, because now it's currently the evening. And we know how the days go, even in the evening. So may our Father in the Son Spirit with us. I love you all. Pray you have a blessed, wonderful, beautiful day. Amen. Come here, Liz. That smells good. Amen.